What helped your symptoms and what causes it? So first of all, what causes it? I just had the luck of the draw. I have schizoaffective disorder, so psychosis is a naturally occurring event in my brain. I believe it has something to do with dopamine. I will look into that. Anyway, the schizoaffective for me is managed by medication. So what causes it today would be if I were to go off of my medication. Without medication, I would just always be psychotic. That's my brain's natural state. As for the symptoms, it's really hard because there's not a lot that can help, when I'm in the throes of it. Like when it's really, really bad, there's not a lot that will get through to me. But comfort, I guess, is huge. Having comfort in any way, having people in my life who are down to just watch a kid's cartoon with me because that's the most intense thing I can handle. People who will go for a walk with me because I will stray off and get lost and get picked up by the cops. Having emotional support, having like physical support of people who will even just help me with the basic things like doing the dishes, because you'd be surprised how much you just can't do when you're lost in your head like that. I absolutely can't even get dressed without help, honestly, because I would leave the house looking like a train wreck. I think depending on the severity of my episodes, there were things I was more receptive to that would help, because sometimes I've had absolutely no awareness of my reality and there was no differentiating real from not real. Whereas there were times where I could think to myself, wow, that is incredibly real, but I suspect that it's not. And when I had that small little grip on reality still, I could at the very least reality check with people, and I could say, hey, do you hear this song playing or is it just me? Oh, it's just me? Okay, that's a hallucination. Okay. It wouldn't stop the hallucination from happening and it wouldn't make it any less real, but I would at least be able to tell the difference, and that's something. But when it's really, really bad and when it's really dark, because for me, it's very gory. Like, I don't know how gory it is for other people, but for me, there's a lot of like guts, and seeing stuff like that, just, I don't know, therapy. Therapy. Anyway, yeah, I wish there was like more that actually did get through to me when I'm in that state, because I wish I could like better help people. I don't always know what to offer people to say, like how to help a loved one, because I don't know what helps me. I can't really think of anything that, other than just alleviating the terror, actually helped. Can you be aware that you're psychotic? A common symptom of psychosis is having an unawareness to your illness. So having no idea that anything is wrong with you. Maybe you'll think that there's something wrong with everyone around you, but certainly not you, because in your mind you don't have psychosis. You're perfectly normal. Well, this isn't the case with everyone, and it isn't the case with every experience. Some people don't have that unawareness and they're actually fully aware that something is going wrong, and there's really nothing they can do to stop it from happening, but they certainly know that it's happening. I don't know if there's a term for this, because I know that anosognosia is the name of the symptom that causes an unawareness, but I don't know what you would call it if you were aware. I just know that with that awareness can come a lot of confusion. I've had episodes where I had no awareness at all, and they were very intense. But I've also had episodes where I knew what was happening, or at least I was confused about what was happening. And while they were also very intense, they were a lot easier to navigate because I could still be myself. The thing is, while I was still somewhat grounded in a semblance of reality, I very much so had the other symptoms of hallucinations and delusions and negative symptoms like avolition. And I was kind of locked in it. Like, on the one hand, I could go to school and I could take notes and I could take tests and I could talk to my friends like myself, but I'd also have this cloud over my head that was just kind of raining down this very stressful onslaught of hearing things. So like, while I'd be talking to someone, I'd be having a separate side conversation with whatever I was hearing outside of that. My first hallucination was hearing voices, and I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Is this my imagination? Do I just have like a really strong imagination, because I don't have any control over this? I can't help what I'm thinking, and I swear to God, this isn't real. Like, I was alone in my bedroom and there were no visual hallucinations, so all I was hearing was voices, and logically I knew that I couldn't see people around me and there's no way anyone else would be in my room. But at the same time, it sounded so real, and I was like, I've got to be making this up, but how the hell am I making this up? When I caught on to the fact that this was a hallucination, or like later on when I'd had more hallucinations and I came to realize that this was actually psychosis and not just me going crazy, I guess I was, on the one hand, I was like, oh shit, that's really bad. Like, that can't be good. And on the other hand, I was like, well, at least now I'm not afraid of it as much because I can tell what's happening. And my hallucinations weren't that bad. They were mostly like hearing doorbells ringing and hearing car engines revving from inside a room, like things that definitely weren't, like, they were neutral, they weren't bad. But it was still scary to experience because I knew I was losing my mind. I guess there's something really strange about still having an ability to function while also losing your mind, because I was very aware that I was slipping away and I knew that my delusions weren't real, but I couldn't tell myself that, you know what I mean? Like I could think to myself, no, that can't be right. But I've got to double check. I've got to fact check. I've got to make sure that this is just a strange thought I'm having, because while I, for instance, had a delusion that I thought I'd carved out chunks of my face, I could look in the mirror and see that I was fine and still have the delusion, like not be able to cut off that belief while also being in reality. So it was very confusing. I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't convince myself that these things that were happening to me were false while still completely knowing that it was not possible. So like while it was happening and okay, so this is a real thing to me, I also was like, how is it real though? Because like there's no evidence, like there's no way this could be happening to me, and yet it was. It also made it really hard to get people to take me seriously, because when I went to the hospital, I don't know like how much experience they had with people in my condition who were aware of their psychosis, because they didn't think that I had it, because I was able to verbalize, oh, and by the way, I'm hearing voices that aren't there. So if I had come in and I would have been like talking to myself, talking back to the voices, yeah, they probably would have pegged me as psychotic. But being able to calmly, rationally verbalize, well, this is my hallucination and I know that it's a hallucination, sounds more like attention seeking, because it was as if to them I was making it up. I wasn't immersed in that reality. I was still in their reality, and they just didn't believe me. Psychosis can look like a lot of things, and I think it's easy to discount other people's experiences when they're dissimilar from yours. I know I've definitely had people comment on my videos saying things like, well, this is nothing like what happened to me, so what is going on with you? Because you didn't have psychosis, I did. And with people who've had anosognosia, like it can be hard to understand that you can totally know what's going on and not be able to stop it. You can totally be aware that the voices you're hearing in your head are all on you and no one else can hear them. Being able to recognize the symptoms doesn't make them any less severe, and it doesn't make it any easier to manage. It can be really confusing because you can't trust your brain, and you know you can't trust your brain, and you can't always tell what is or isn't real. But when it's identified, it's like, oh, okay, that's not real. You don't always have that like full-on immersion with psychosis, but even without it, you're still immersed in the symptoms. They're still completely like taken over. And while that is, nice to know, it doesn't stop it from happening. That's still a severe case of psychosis. You know what? As much as I do try to be well informed, I sometimes struggle to find the resources I'm looking for. And while I could go on and on and on digging for more articles, I just figured it would be easier to go off of my own personal experience having gone into psychosis through a manic episode. I'm going to use my worst psychotic episode as an example because it was the most clear-cut manic psychosis I've ever had. Coming into it, it was a very short period, right? There's a prodromal phase for bipolar, just like there's a prodromal phase for psychosis, and that prodromal phase tends to be much shorter. For me, I went into my episode probably within a month. I had gone off of my medication, and just mere weeks later, I was in a full-blown episode. So that in itself was a very short time frame. And in that time frame, I did have the typical symptoms you'd find, the negative symptoms of psychosis, but they were a little bit different because I wasn't taking care of my hygiene, and it was because I was locked in my mind. So I kind of had avolition, I would say, in the sense that I didn't have the motivation to do anything other than just, absorb myself into my computer and get stuck in this loop of, refreshing my feed, etc., really not getting anywhere with any one task. And while if I'd been in a depressive state, this may have been like a lack of, engagement, I was hyper engaged. So I wasn't going anywhere with my tasks, but I was hyper engaged in them, and I was ruminating. I had the ruminating thoughts that come with psychosis, so I was spinning in my head over the same thought, rereading paragraphs like 5 times before getting to the next paragraph in like a Wikipedia article that just went from Marie Antoinette to octopus to Hitler, you know what I mean? Just like clicking those blue hyperlinks and getting absolutely nowhere, and having the tangential thoughts and the like free associations, I forget what it's called, but where you make loose associations out of things, all of those thinking processes, but like wired. And I had the asociality, which is another negative symptom, and I just didn't want to be interrupted. I was irritated with people. I didn't want anything to do with them. I wasn't interested in being around them. And while I may be the life of the party when I'm manic because I'm really excitable and fun to be around, I don't want other people interrupting me. So I would lock myself in my room when my friends would be over. My boyfriend would have people over every single day, and they would party all night long. And I would lock myself in my room to stay the fuck away from them because I didn't want anything to do with them. I just wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to be hyper absorbed in whatever meaningless task I was doing that I would just ruminate on for hours and get absolutely nowhere with. I wasn't productive with things. I had things going on, like a book that I would read out of order, for instance, but I was going nowhere by myself, not wanting anyone involved. It's interesting because before ever going into psychosis, I did have manic episodes because I have schizoaffective disorder. And so I have both bipolar and psychosis in one disorder. And when I was typically manic, before it would get to the point that it was like a psychotic break, I was doing a lot of projects, like productive projects, and maybe they wouldn't get finished, but I would like bake a cake at 3 a.m. And for some reason in this kind of a prodrome, I was just like, it was very heavily related to words. Like it was related to reading things, because a lot of my psychosis comes with wanting to learn about angels and the afterlife and portals and all of these weird, like, metaphysical, esoteric things. That's where my psychosis takes me, because those become delusions. So that's kind of the starting point is, the obsession, the ruminating thoughts, like a lot of the thinking processes, and the negative symptoms are kind of amplified, but they're still there. Anyway, I am by no means an expert, and I clearly don't know enough about this subject to really speak well of it. That's just my own personal experience, having been in mania and psychosis, like going into psychosis at the same time. So don't take my word for it, but that was just my experience, and that's, I guess, what I would have to say about what the prodrome would be like in a manic episode.